Rising Italian star Marco Bezzecchi starts this Tissot sprint third in the overall rankings, 36 points adrift of Bagnaia. 10 laps then this Tissot sprint coming your way, and as we mentioned, the best conditions of the day so far. There are a few concerns with the heavy rain falling throughout this morning's action. The riders expressing some doubts if those conditions continue, whether there might be some disruption to this Tissot sprint. But as it stands right now, we are all set for, albeit a wet surface, for this sprint race, but it looks like we're going to get ahead at 3 p.m. local time as expected. Great news for the British fans who braved the elements here today. If they didn't have shelter grandstands, well, you really did have to tough it out. Umbrellas, raincoats, cagoule, gloves and scarves have been the order of the day as we get set for this Tissot sprint. In the company of myself, Matt Burt, Lewis Sotheby in the commentary box, Simon Crafar down on the grid. Lewis, we expected fireworks this morning despite the damp conditions. It certainly wasn't a damp squib, was it, at Silverstone? Marco Bezzecchi on pole, Jack Miller performing exceptionally well as he always did in the rain conditions on the front row, with Alex Marquez on the Gresini Ducati. He completes that front row for this 10-lap sprint.
Conditions that provided the ultimate challenge to the best riders in the world. The rider who carries the number one on his cap, Pecco Bagnaia, will start from the front of the second row. He was one of several to get caught out by the conditions earlier on this morning. We saw his anger at one stage in the Ducati Lenovo team box when he returned to the pits and realised that he wasn't going to get out for one more lap. He will go from the second row of the grid. An interesting second row with Augusto Fernandez in the action as well. As Marc Marquez takes a very close look at the conditions, that is probably going to be the big question mark going into this 10-lap Tissot sprint. What kind of conditions are going to face them? Because at the moment, the track is most certainly wet.
Yeah, we haven't had rainfall around Silverstone now for probably near on a couple of hours, and that's promising news when we had some pretty bleak forecast overnight. When we arrived at the circuit around 7 o'clock this morning, the heavens had already opened. It was teeming down throughout the morning action, and it was still very, very wet when the Moto3 riders started their qualifying sessions. It is going to be risk over reward ratio tested to the limit here this afternoon, because as we've seen throughout all three classes, it's so easy to make a mistake. The punishment not really fitting the crime. But Marc Marquez, he's got an awful lot of work to do. He finds himself in 14th place. This man, well, it might have been a different story for Jack Miller had he not had two monumental scares. He was coming through fifth gear, a lock-to-lock slide, going through the high-speed Woodcote corner. He just set the fastest first two sectors of that Q2 session. That cost him time. Then he had no brakes going into what was the former turn number one, the Copse corner. But this is the highlight of the weekend in many respects so far. This was Miller magic. Just watch this, ladies and gentlemen. Your jaw will drop. Marvel at the skill of Thriller Miller, thrilling fans all around the world as he so often does. Look at that. Jack Miller at his absolute best. Absolutely wonderful super slow motion shot. What a get by our camera crew as well in the IPF. Congratulations to them, because that was a stunning shot. It's gone viral all around the world on social media, and it just gives you an indication, Jack, of the skill levels that these guys operate on. They are aliens.
They are the best in the business, and he is the ultimate entertainer. He even entertained himself there as Jack Miller watched that back on the screens. Motorsport-esque, and if there's anyone who knows about motorsport, it is motocross, it is KTM. Of course, flag-to-flag rules could potentially still apply for this Tissot sprint. Riders potentially will be able to change motorcycles if they feel that the conditions are suitable to do so. Of course, with such a short distance, that does limit the possibility of someone being able to do that. Because the race distance is so short, there is no time to win the time back if you do come in and change motorcycles. But of course, the teams will be on alert to make sure that they do have the second motorcycles ready. But you would imagine, unless something dramatic happens over the next half an hour, they'll be running wet for the duration of the sprint, largely because, Matt, the conditions here, it's so cold that there isn't exactly much temperature to dry this track up. It's Baltic. It's not just been very, very wet on Saturday here at Silverstone. It has been very, very chilly indeed. At times this afternoon and this morning, I've had 4 layers on. That's not an exaggeration. Yes, it is the summer in the UK. Sometimes we do tend to get a little bit of precipitation, I think it's fair to say. Now then, this Saturday rainfall has thrown a curveball to more than a couple of riders. We just saw there Jorge Martin's Prima Pramac
Ducati. He was really strong in the full dry yesterday, 3rd and 2nd in the 2 sessions, but he starts 7th on the grid after the rain this morning. And perhaps the biggest loser on this soaked Saturday was Aleix Espargaro, who said he pushed like hell to find a 1:58.1 in the dry yesterday, which put him nearly 7/10 of a second clear of the field. But a little bit like Argentina, a little bit like Jerez as well, Aleix Espargaro found it really difficult in that wet Q2. He starts way down in 12th place, which at least is better than this man, Lewis, who had an absolute horror show. A shocker, to say the least. Fabio Quartararo starting dead last for the sprint and the main Grand Prix tomorrow. The first time in his MotoGP career Fabio Quartararo starts outside of the top 20 in 80 previous MotoGP qualifying sessions. He's qualified out of the top 10 on just 11 occasions. 6 of those, believe it or not, have come this year. There's been some qualifying issues for Fabio Quartararo, and they rolled on in those rain conditions this morning. He finished Q1 7 seconds behind his teammate Frankie Morbidelli, and for the first time in his career in MotoGP, he is right at the back of the pack.
Talk about the biggest of losers. He certainly was this morning. Of course, this is a circuit that he's won at in dominant fashion 2 years ago when they didn't see which way he went. Quartararo did have a very big moment coming into the Vale chicane during qualifying 1, where we saw him appear on screen with his motorcycle not moving. That was because he ran on to the point where he had to sort of stop the motorcycle before wheeling it back onto the circuit again. But unfortunately, couldn't keep the engine running, had to wheel it up pit lane, and only managed to get back out on track for 1 time lap, and was unable to maximise that single effort, which is why he finds himself at the very back of the grid. Pecco Bagnaia, as mentioned, he will go from the 2nd row of the grid, which was something of a save in many respects, given the crash he had at Brooklands during qualifying. When he went down and realised that he wasn't going to get back on track again, he must have feared that he would be starting somewhere on the 3rd or 4th row, but he's managed to hang on to a place at the front of row 2.
Got out of jail a little bit, didn't he, Bagnaia? Because it looks, as Lewis mentioned, he was going to plummet down the order, but 4th, he'd have taken that when he was careering into the gravel trap at Brooklyn. Just coming quickly back to Quartararo, the 24-year-old Frenchman, 130 points already adrift of Pecco Bagnaia in the World Championship. He can kiss goodbye to any hopes of reclaiming the crown this year. Now, of course, with the grey, gloomy, overcast conditions, keeping it very cold here at Silverstone, nobody surely is going to take the punt and go on the slick tyres at the start of this 10-lap sprint. So it's all about the rain rubber, which they have had a good look at. This morning's 30-minute free practice 2 session was fully in the wet. Both qualifying sessions also ran in full wet conditions. Fabio Gianantonio must have felt like he missed out a little bit this morning in qualifying, because he was superb, topping that 30-minute free practice 2 session. But then, unfortunately, a crash at the first corner in Q1 cost him his hopes of being in the 2nd session. He wasn't the only victim, though, in that pretty tricky, treacherous first corner. We also saw the likes of Luca Marini go down there, Augusto Fernandez go down there, although Fernandez had mounted a superb recovery, Lewis, because he just got through right at the death in that Q1 session behind Frankie Morbidelli, and then he was one of the star performers in that 2nd session as well. Now, of course, Silverstone, famous for being the British home of 2- and 4-wheel motorsport. I'm delighted to say he's already raced here a few weeks ago in Formula 1. It's McLaren star Oscar Piastri with Simon Crafar on the grid.
Yes, he is. Oscar is from Australia, and I've also been told by the car guys I've touched base with that you're one of the most promising up-and-coming drivers in that scene. Oscar, I'd love to know what brings you to Silverstone. Are you into bikes, and have you spent any time on bikes yourself?
I like bikes. I mean, I like watching all kinds of motorsport and you know, the top level of any sport, really. It's always interesting to see how the best guys in the world go about it, and the best girls in the world go about their sports. I've ridden a motorbike once. I ended up in the side of a shed, and that's all my motorbike experience. So I'm happy on 4 wheels, but no, it's always you know, impressive to see these guys on 2 wheels do their thing.
And I see you're a guest of the Pramac guys, is that right?
Yes, yeah, doing some stuff with Quadlock, and yeah, Pramac have been very welcoming today. Johan is a Quadlock ambassador as well, so he's been looking after me for the day, and hopefully he can have a good weekend.
Thanks for your time, Oscar, and enjoy the rest of today.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Thanks to Oscar Piastri. Great to see some Formula One stars on the grid. I believe his McLaren teammate Lando Norris will also be here tomorrow. Lewis, you're far more knowledgeable about Formula motorsport than what I am, but I believe, as Simon said, Oscar Piastri, one of the upcoming big superstars of the future in Formula One, and he's got a bit of recent sprint success himself on four wheels.
It certainly has. F1 went sprinting last weekend at the iconic Spa-Francorchamps circuit in Belgium. Oscar Piastri qualified and finished second in that sprint. I think you can all guess, if you've got any faint knowledge of Formula One, who beat him to the win. Max Verstappen, of course, who's dominating that World Championship. The race there, the sprint declared wet, which means that riders are allowed to swap bikes at any moment should the conditions dictate.
Well, what lies in store for the likes of this man then? Thriller Miller going from the middle of the second row on the factory KTM machine. Never discount the hard-charging Brad Binder. We've seen him side through from lower than 10th on the grid. That's where he starts to sprint. Let's go get some pre-sprint thoughts of an expectant KTM factory boss. Pit Byron, who's with Simon.
He is just next to just next to Jack Miller, but I'm also thinking about Brad, because we know how good he is in sprints, and it's a lot better conditions now than in qualifying. Give us your thoughts, please, Pit.
Yeah, first of all, I'm super happy that we have a guy here in the first row, having a rookie in the second row, so things went really good, but our best guy in the point standing is a little bit too far back, Brad, but on 10th position, we know he can do a lot out of that area. Let's hope for a good start. Let's hope for another good rocket KTM start. But all in all, I'm super happy. I mean, Paul is back in 15th position, so all these guys pretty strong. So I'm just exciting, and let's wait for the sprint race. I think almost nothing to predict. These guys, the guys had a difficult day so far with all the rain, but now it's a bit better, almost dry. So let's see.
Pit, one other thing before I let you go is it looks like your machine is working well in both conditions, meaning wet and dry. What have you heard from your engineers and riders?
Yeah, the riders were actually happy from the beginning yesterday and today. So yes, the bike works well, and I think in rain we have been slightly better than in dry in the history, but now we picked it up in dry condition. But it's always good to know when the weather is changing, we are not in a big problem. We know we can do that. It will be difficult for everybody, but we are ready for rain or sun.
Thank you and good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Thanks to Pit. Good news then, KTM ready to race. That's their slogan, isn't it? Ready to race, rain or shine. As we mentioned, yeah, Brad Binder needs to start racking up some big points hauls, because just missing out in heartbreaking fashion on both podiums in Assen pre-summer break. He has now slipped 80 points adrift of Pecco Bagnaia in the World Championship. Yes, of course, I know people are going to say, well, Bagnaia recovered 91 points back to Fabio Quartararo last year, but you do feel that 80 points already with 12 races to go is a big ask, particularly when we've seen the recent performances of Pecco Bagnaia on 3 successive sprint and Grand Prix podiums. Now then, Alex Marquez back on the front row for the 3rd time this year for the Gresini Racing MotoGP team, and a good performance by Fabio Di Gianantonio in the wet FP2 this morning. So high hopes for Gresini Racing going into this afternoon's Tissot sprint. Let's get some thoughts from their team boss, Michele Massini, who's with Simon.
He is. Michele, both of your riders looking really strong in those tricky conditions in the rain, and I'm a believer that Alex Marquez, if everything comes together somewhere this year, you know, in one of the circuits and conditions, that he's clever enough, skilled enough to put it on the podium or even win. I just want to know, how do you feel about the progress, but also going into the sprint today?
Yeah, I'm totally agree. This is how we looking for, how we work for, and yes, we was a bit unlucky with Dizza that he could not put together the qualifying despite the crash, but we believe that Alex could make a great race.
Okay. Thank you, best of luck.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Thanks to Michele Massini in the wet Termatru Hondo Sunday Grand Prix. Alex Marquez was one of the star performers, wasn't he? It was his only podium for the Gresini Racing team so far this year. He hasn't fared too well in the sprints, it's fair to say, so he'll be looking for a bit of salvation here on Super Saturday. And it's always hard to predict, isn't it, what we're going to get from this man on screens right now. Aprilis Maverick Vinales, 8th place on the grid, nursing a bit of a whack and some pain in his left leg, Lewis, after a real violent high side coming through turn 17 yesterday. As we mentioned, which Maverick Vinales is going to turn up this afternoon, who knows?
No idea, and which Aprilia is going to turn up as well, because they've certainly fluctuated given the dry and wet conditions. They're very strong in the dry, as they've proven over a couple of years here at Silverstone. Maverick Vinales, of course, has such a good record around this circuit. A winner here for Suzuki, his maiden victory here back in 2016. This is where we're based. That's where you can find us, in the iconic Silverstone wing. You will have certainly noticed as we've gone through this weekend so far, it is a different start-finish straight to previous MotoGP visits, with the exception of 2011 and 2012, which will be significant for two reasons. First of all, the start of this sprint will see them all funnel into a very tight turn 3 as they head towards Village Corner, which could see some interesting action on the opening lap. And then, of course, the final lap, suddenly Stowe and Vale become huge overtaking opportunities if we have a close battle on the final lap of this sprint.
There is the F1 star then, Oscar Piastri, just enjoying some pre-sprint atmosphere here. Delighted to say that he did join us a few moments ago to have a little pre-race natter with Simon Crafo. He's keeping a very close eye on a man who's seeking his first sprint podium since round 1 in Portimao. Since then, it's been some dark times for number 93, Marc Marquez. Yesterday, he only ran one soft tyre at the end of the session. There is Marquez just having a little pre-sprint embrace and a little chat with Oscar Piastri there. A thumbs up from the Australian, and a little bit of chat as well. But Marquez happy to see the McLaren driver on the grid. As we mentioned, he knows how to put a fast lap together on 4 wheels around this Silverstone circuit. What lies in store though for Marquez? 14th on the Repsol Honda, and an indication how he's kind of clicked into this self-preservation mode. He's not going the old DNA, the old explosive Marc Marquez, and that was evident yesterday, Lewis, when he admitted at the end of practice yesterday that he only went for one soft tyre because he didn't feel in the zone. He didn't feel like he had the confidence in him to push harder.
And he just wants to try and establish a base on that Repsol Honda, a setup that he can work with and try and build from to try and get out of this slump that both he and Repsol Honda have been in. Of course, Marc Marquez still yet to score on a Sunday in 2023. All his points have come in these Tissot sprints so far this season. And physically, he's not at 100% yet either, of course. Those 5 crashes that he had at the Sachsenring are still causing him a little bit of pain, particularly in his right abductor and in his ankle. The rib injuries are a thing of the past, we're glad to report.
Great job by this young man this morning, Augusto Fernandez, a 2-time Moto2 winner around this 5.9-kilometre Silverstone circuit. Just the second time he found himself in Q2 so far in his rookie season this season, and he's qualified on the grid for the first time inside the top 10, the first time inside the top 6, because he starts in the middle of that second row, sandwiched in between the two VR46 Academy stablemates Bagnaia and Marini. And great to see this man back in action, and what a massive morale boost, confidence boost it was for Pol Espargaro. We haven't seen him since Friday's action in Portimao, where he suffered those serious, multiple career-threatening injuries. So to take 15th place in those really tricky, treacherous conditions this morning, Lewis, that was a massive win for Pol.
Incredible job from Pol Espargaro. Javier Pons Raul was just coming over there to wish Pol well.